name is Steve Pace. I'm a volunteer here today for the League of Women Voters. I'm also an attorney fellow with Ingersoll Law Firm here in Cedar Rapids. Our co-sponsors today for this legislative forum are the League of Women Voters and the African American Museum of Iowa. The League of Women Voters is a trusted nonpartisan political organization. Members do hands-on work to safeguard democracy. While we never endorse a candidate, we are directly involved in shaping the important issues to keep our community strong. All members of the community are invited to join League of Women Voters. I'm a member, guys. Okay. Persons not eligible to vote are welcome to be associate members. The African American Museum of Iowa has been working to preserve, exhibit, and teach Iowa's African American history in Cedar Rapids and across the state for more than 20 years. So thanks to them for co-sponsoring this event. And thank you to our legislators for coming. We've had people, the list has been changing as we've been going here, but I think with us today, I'm going to start clover on that end. Senator Liz Mathis, Senator Wally Horn, Representative Todd Taylor, Representative Art Stade, Representative Kirsten Running-Marquardt, and Representative Ken Reiser. All right, and thank you all for coming. We have a few folks that wanted to be here today but could not, and I didn't get all of these down, but Dan Zumba has a commitment in another county. He has 4 in his district, and Senator Hogue has a criminal justice forum in Fort Dodge, so he's not able to be here today. Thanks to Deb Roberts for helping with arrangements, and to Mercy Medical Center for allowing us to be here in this wonderful facility today. There's cameras around the room, and you will note that it's being taped by Pro Video, and it will be rebroadcast on IMON Channel 6 and Mediacom Channel 18. Also, Neighborhood Network News will be available, is taping, and it will be available on their website, as well as the League of Women Voters website. And with that, I guess I got a couple other announcements. There's information on tables that you can pick up, including a list of legislators and committee assignments that's back there. And Janet's holding them up, that blue sheet that you see back there. If you have questions, please write them out. League members will come and get them and give them to these folks over here on these yellow sheets, and then they will sort them, give them to me, and I will try to ask as many as we can, okay? Here's the structure we're going to follow today. We're not going to do opening statements because there's usually lots of questions, so we're going to go right to the questions. Each question, each person will answer each question if they would like to. They'll have 1.5 minutes. And we have timers here in the front, and they will hold up signs. 30 seconds left, they'll hold up the sign that says 30 seconds. 15 seconds, they'll hold up another sign. And then there's a stop sign. And when they say stop, if you could please stop. If you don't, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to ask the next person. Okay? So that's the way we will proceed. Any questions anybody has about that? I know that there are people that have come up to me and said, I really want you to ask this question. I can't make up questions, so if you want me to ask something, you need to put it on the sheet and give it to them, okay? And I know some of you have done that because I just happen to have questions here from you. So let's see what we have. And there'll be more coming. Okay. We are going to start with Senator Mathis first, and then we're going to go with each one, okay, as we go. And then the next time we'll start with Senator Horn and so forth. So just keep going when the next person is done. First question. High-speed internet, state funding, broadband bill. Last session, the state broadband bill was passed with no funding. Does the crystal ball show any future discussions for funding to promote affordable high-speed internet access to all Iowans?
Well, I know this has, been on the agenda for quite some time. We did have a very robust bill last year. We did have a very robust bill last year. We do not have anything that has gone through economic growth. I serve on the Economic Growth Committee. There may be something in economic development, but I have not seen it yet. I know that Representative Kirsten running Marquardt is on, we call it Econ Devo, I guess, over in the House, and she might be able to shed some light on that.
Can you hear, okay, are the microphones on? Did you hear Senator Mattis? Yes. I couldn't hear her very well, so, okay. Go ahead. Senator Martin.
Now it's on.
There we go.
Understanding this new procedure, usually we talk about it. Now, asking us question, did someone ask for me to answer this question?
Well, what we're doing is just, we have a question, and each legislator that wishes to address that question can. If you
Sure,
prefer not to, or it's already been said, then you can pass, and we'll go to the next one.
Well, the answer would be if we all take 3 minutes apiece, we don't have much more than 2 questions. So I don't know
it's
how.
It's a minute and a half for each person.
Well, I know, but we have we have like 40 minutes, 50 now, and if we all answer, we don't get to many questions. But broadband.
Those are the rules we set up. So that's how we're doing it. You don't have to take the whole minute and a half.
Or you can just pass.
I'll pass on this then.
Okay.
There.
So there.
What did you do?
He made a statement.
Now what?
We all got a lot better looking.
Well, those are lights that don't come on right away, are they? Everybody get your cell phones out.
Only thing I can say, I apologize.
The microphones work.
Go ahead.
There.
There you go.
Let there be light.
Anybody else?
Okay.
You know,
Well,
Go ahead.
next person.
Representative running
Who would
Marquardt,
like to speak on that? Yes.
Representative running Marquardt, Cedar Rapids. No, we're not doing introductions or opening statements, but I do want to say good morning and thank you all for being here. It's really important that we engage in a public way with our legislators, and I appreciate that, and with the community as many possibilities as possible. Right, I mean, it's going to be a simple answer. There has not been bills that have been moving through economic growth is the policy committee, and then the economic development. I have not seen any add-ons or other proposals, so it does not. At this time, there does not seem to be additional funding for broadband companies. Long answer short.
And I will just add the Connect Every Acre goal is a laudable goal. I think we're taking a phased approach to that. The bill that was passed last year would allow companies property tax breaks in order to build the towers, which would extend the lines out into the country, because the issue is mainly in rural Iowa right now. And that's the first step of a long process. If we were going to do it all at one time, it'd be unbelievably expensive. So we're having to take little nibbles at it every year. So we're not where we want to be, but it's incredibly important that every Iowan has access to broadband in the 21st century. So we're taking steps to do that.
It's also, just to add on, it's also, you know, good to sort of see what we put in place and see how that works, and then see if we need to make changes or improvements and move forward from there. So possibly next year, after we get some results of sort of what's been put into place on if there's going to be any direct appropriations or something more than tax credits for moving forward.
Thank you. Next question. We're going to start this time with Senator Horn. If you care to address this, there's a question about the synthetic drug bill. This is not the marijuana bill now. This is a synthetic drug bill. Please ask about the progress of this bill.
Well, I'm not on the committee, so I don't know the progress of it. I know that we're trying to work it out. It's very difficult because the chemicals change in it. You pass a law, and the next year it's a different chemical, and it's against the law. It's not against the law, and we have to pass it on. So year after year, we've done that. But I don't know where it's at.
There's also there's a bill about opioids, I believe, or something.
Yes.
And that may not be the same thing.
No.
Can we stay on the
Not at
synthetic?
all.
Yeah, stay on the synthetic one first, and then we'll talk
Yeah.
about that one. All right.
You wanna-
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm glad this question came up. As Senator Horn said, current law is completely inadequate when it comes to synthetic drugs, and we have had lots of Iowans that have died after they've become addicted to these drugs, and they are very, very dangerous because you have absolutely no idea what you are going to get when you take one of these. So this is actually an example of great bipartisanship. Representative Stade and I have been working together on this bill. Last year, Senator Hogue helped us on the Senate side. We almost got it through, but not quite. And I'm proud to say that the bill that we worked on this year passed the Public Safety Committee in the Iowa House unanimously. And it's got some interesting things. In addition to the synthetic drug language, it's got some drug penalty reform in there. So it lowers the penalty for crack cocaine to make it closer to that for powdered cocaine, because there's really no difference. I mean, cocaine's cocaine, and it didn't make sense to have a huge disparity there, especially when that disparity would lead to a disparate impact upon minorities. And then the last thing is, and this was a Democratic input on the committee, they changed the penalty for the smallest amount of cocaine for first-time offenders. And I think this is a good first step towards shifting from purely punishment to more of a treatment-based response to drug abuse.
Representative Running Marquardt or Representative Stade,
Did I get it?
Representative Taylor, want to talk about that?
Yes, I want to thank Representative Reiser for his comments on that. He's absolutely accurate on everything that he said. One of the difficulties that law enforcement has is that each time there's a synthetic drug that becomes illegal, they simply change the formula a little bit by adding something to it or changing it slightly, and then it's no longer illegal. So in this particular bill, there's the authority to amend those each year. Is it the Pharmaceutical Board, I believe, that does that? Board of Pharmacy. Iowa
Thank
Board
you.
of Pharmacy, thank you very much. That was able to do that, and then the legislature has time to validate that in the next legislative session, or if we're in session, so that that can take place. So it's a bill that we can keep ahead of many of these drug dealers and so on. Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to address that one? Okay, then I'd like to go next, and if I could, start with Representative Reiser on this,
Sure.
the opioid bill that we were discussing prior to the beginning. If you could explain what that is and where that is at this point?
Sure. The bill, I think, is actually in the Senate, but I'm aware of it. Senator Kinney, who's a law enforcement officer, I think was behind that in the Senate. And what this does is if first responders come upon a scene where there is somebody who has overdosed on an opioid-based drug, they will have, it's called Narcan, with them, and they will be able to inject this Narcan into the person, which will buy that person time to get to the emergency room, and ultimately it will save lives. There's been a little bit of a discussion as to whether or not it should just be first responders, or should we make that available to families of those who are addicted to heroin and other things. I think the consensus is more around making first responders have access to it, and I think that's a good thing. And I went down and met with the Ely Fire Department and the EMTs there, and they're absolutely in support of this. They think it will save lives.
And I know we have others that wish to address this too, Representative Stade.
Right. I think the bill is going to move this year. It did move in public safety as well. The previous version of it last year, as Representative Reiser indicated, would have permitted individuals to receive that or families to receive it. So it got narrowed down to police, firefighters, and EMS. So expect that to move in the coming weeks. Thanks.
Senator Matthews?
Yes. So some of you know there's been a resurgence of heroin. Street heroin is cheaper than cocaine or methamphetamine, and so we've seen a great number of cases, of overdose cases in our hospitals throughout Iowa. So last year, the Senate did start, we called it the Narcan bill for lack of numbers and other things. And it was presented first by the Iowa Medical Society, and it was endorsed by Senator Braze, who is an EMT, and his daughter is also a heroin addict. And so he was very concerned that it's a matter of time that someone has when they discover someone has overdosed. So the first bill that we passed and was supported by all kinds of drug advocacy groups, they came to the Capitol last year and watched as we passed that bill. We sent it over to the House. The House did not pass it last year, but it was still a live bill because it's still within the same General Assembly. So it was a live bill. They were talking about changing it, putting some things on there. So what Senator Kinney and Senator Braze did is that they reinitiated another bill. So together they worked on that law enforcement piece that Representative Reiser was talking about. That would, that law enforcement they were looking at the first bill, weren't very, they were a little skeptical about it, and so they worked together to make a bill a little bit better, a little bit more pleasing, so that it would pass through and everybody would agree on it. So that's what we have in the Senate right now.
Anyone else who would like to speak to that one? Okay, thank you. We have several questions here regarding guns, and maybe the more general one is, are you in favor of extending background checks on long guns and military-type weapons? And there's a related one, what can we do to keep guns out of the hands of children? Senator Horn, would you like to start on that one?
Sure. You asked two questions, I guess. I don't see anything wrong with background checks, but it's trying to get it worded right and get it set so that we can have a consistency in the background checks, and you're checking what you want to check and not other things. Now, what was the second question?
Well, it was about children, keeping guns
Children,
out of the hands of
okay,
children.
all right. Well, I also go along with the gun locks and stuff that have them available for people to have them in their homes and wear when they're children. And also penalties for parents or relatives or people who have guns that children are around and create an accident, and that they can be convicted for it. Thank you.
Representative Taylor?
I basically agree with exactly what you said.
All right. Any Representative Steve?
I agree with him as well. But I think all of the gun legislation needs to be, have the public safety test applied to it, and giving children guns, I don't think is safe. I do think we need to have background checks for any time that a gun is sold. And I just think we need to use common sense approach to it. I don't believe in infringing anybody's Second Amendment rights, but I also believe that the public is entitled to safety. And the kids should not be, they should not have access to loaded guns or guns in the home or anywhere. Thank you.
Representative Running Marquardt, I stand by people's Second Amendment rights. I did work in a gun store for 4 or 5 years in high school and college. The one bill that causes me most concern, and I can't vote for it in the way that it's moving through, is the one that allows, and I think that's what the second question was about. Currently in Iowa, if you're 14 or under, you're not allowed to use a handgun. And this one says that children are allowed under adult supervision to use handguns. And it doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't pass my gut check. And there aren't really that many guns, or if any. I heard there's one that kind of gets close, but there's not handguns that are made to fit the hands of children who are 2 or 3 or 4 years old. So it's a hot issue because we have people who come to the Capitol, and there's a couple people who come up with their children and say that, it looks like this one guy brings his 5 and his 7-year-old up there all the time, and that just bothers me. Moving forward, I hope that we can focus on issues, maybe not only in this forum, but in other areas that really will enhance our children and the quality of their life, such as adequately funding our schools and making sure that when they're sick, they have the healthcare coverage that we have sort of set a standard for here in the state of Iowa. And so that's the one gun bill that causes me, I need to stop, but that one causes me to lose sleep at night. Yes, thank you.
I would say in regards to the background checks, the national system is fairly porous because the states are all different in how they report people into that database. Iowa's actually very good, and so I think the way we do background checks is effective. The problem is there are other states that don't participate in that database. So if one of their citizens comes here, they may be able to have access to a gun when maybe they shouldn't. And so I think there's a national issue there. As far as the kids, I don't think any 5 or 7-year-old should ever be handling a handgun, but that's not really what this bill does in my view. What the bill does is it says those under 14 may handle a pistol or a revolver just as they can a shotgun or a rifle under the supervision of a parent or an instructor. And I am a military vet, member of the American Legion. The American Legion has shooting teams for kids where they teach safety, gun safety, under the age of 14, at the age of 12. And so this would allow that sort of thing to go on. And the first time I ever shot a gun was actually under the supervision of my father. We went out in a field and I shot a watermelon, and he showed me the force involved in that. And I'll tell you, it taught me a valuable lesson at 12 to respect guns and treat them properly. So we're not talking about 5 and 7-year-olds. We're talking about kids that are a little bit older. Thanks.
Thanks. We have a question about tanning beds, and I think we'll start this time with Representative Taylor. University of Iowa cancer experts say that tanning beds are a serious issue with young people. This person has a daughter who had melanoma, and they attributed it to tanning when she was a teenager. And this question is, would you please address what should be done about tanning beds?
Well, first of all,
particularly as it relates to children.
Certainly. I was going to say, first of all, I have been a sponsor of some legislation in the past to ban tanning beds for teens. That you had to be at least 18 years old, and we basically set up some framework that you had to show your driver's license to protect that. Didn't want to shut down any tanning booths, but we wanted to indicate the dangers, and particularly for young teenagers. That bill in the past hasn't gone anywhere. I apologize. I'm not sure if there's a legislation this year or if it passed this past week, which was funnel week, where a bill has to be out of the committee of one chamber to continue to be eligible. I've been a co-sponsor of it in the past, and there was one year where I sponsored one, and there was one that was very, very similar and just didn't have the driver's license aspect to it. It can cause cancer. There's a young lady who's on the Cedar Rapids Police Force who, as a teenager, she shared her story with me, and I was very compelled that we could prevent. This is preventable, so let's try to do that. So again, I apologize. I don't know where the current status of any legislation is. I've sponsored in the past, would support it in the future, but that's about all I know.
Go ahead.
I'll address that.
Representative State.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. In reference to the tanning, I don't think anybody needs to have overexposure to ultraviolet rays. It does produce skin cancer. At my age now, I'm experiencing the same thing. I go in every 6 months and have the carcinic, what you call lesions, whatever, from this, and it's skin damage from sun that I've had over my lifetime because I used to tan. And to see this week at the Capitol individuals that are 23 years old that already have skin cancer from tanning beds makes me stop and think that young people, teenagers should not be tanning. I don't believe that should be with or without the permission of parents. It's an industry that I think is making money off of this that is wrong. And I don't see any real good purpose for the tanning beds. Thank you.
You know, we're going to talk about tanning beds, which we're doing right now. Back to the bill, the gun bill that passed the Judiciary Committee in the Iowa House. It does not say anything about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds. It just says that if you're under the age of 14, under adult supervision, you are able to have a handgun. And it doesn't say 2-year-olds can't, or 3-year-olds can't, or 4-year-olds can't. So we talk about ways that we can protect our children. Tanning, you know, we wouldn't want to have even under adult supervision, a 2-year-old sitting in a tanning booth. But this bill allows that a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old would have access under direct parent supervision to a gun, a handgun now. We don't allow 2 or 3-year-olds to drive cars or get married or do some of these other things because sort of as a society we've gotten together and said that's not how we think things should be for our children. So, you know, there's a lot of things out there that we're looking at to protect our children, and instead I wish that we could move towards the conversation on what can we do to adequately fund our schools for our children moving forward so they have the education that they need, that they might not be getting at home with people who want small children to have handguns necessarily. I know that we're doing tanning and we're talking about drugs and opioids, excuse me, easy for me to say. But, you know, right now this was funnel week, and so we went through the process of saying sort of what bills were in, what bills were out, and moving through the, we got one step closer to sort of where we're at with appropriations and funding different departments and programs in our public schools and Medicaid. So those are also important issues, which I hope that we'll be able to get to soon.
We're going to. They're coming.
Great.
Those questions are starting to come. Representative Reiser.
Yeah, I will say on this issue of tanning beds, it's an issue of individual rights on the one hand, parental rights on another, and public safety on another. And it's a matter of where you draw the line. So, you know, do you draw the line at, you know, would you ban them for adults? I don't think so. I think adults should be able to exercise that decision. So the question is, do you ban them under 18? The bill that came forward before the Human Resources Committee did just that. It banned it under 18. And there were some who were concerned with that because it wasn't consistent with other things. So in the state of Iowa, a 17-year-old can ride a motorcycle, they can drive a car, they can fly an airplane, they can fly a balloon, they can hunt, and they can actually, even with parental consent, sign up for the military and fight and die for their country. So the thought was, if you can do all these other things that are much more risky, why would we say that a 17-year-old couldn't go to a tanning salon? So it was amended and passed out of Human Resources, and I voted for it, so it's actually advancing, and it's a ban under 17. So 16 and under would not be able to use a tanning salon, which addresses that public safety part, but if you were 17, you could. Thank you.
Yes, Representative Reiser and I have a constituent who's in Marion. He owns a tanning bed business, and he has taken us through his business. He's tried to show us all of the safety issues that he has to, all the safety measures that he has to adhere to. So certainly we have kept an open ear to him, but my opinion is that we should be banning 18 and under. Here's why. 17-year-olds are juniors in high school, and 18-year-olds seniors. That is the junior senior prom, as you know. And many of our young women go tanning prior to the junior senior prom. And they want to look good in their dress, they want to look good in their photographs, and they're not thinking about perhaps you know, some type of growth on their face in 5 years. And so for that, when we passed it out of the Senate, it was no one under 18. And now the House has amended it to 17. I disagree with that. I feel that it should be, no one under 18 should be able to tan. It's the health professionals have shown us the prevalence of skin cancer, and it's growing. And I think we're in the same situation as where we saw smoking. And we have banned smoking in restaurants. We've tried to protect the public and tried to make health outcomes better. And we've worked on that. And I think the next thing will be tanning.
Thank you. Senator Horn?
My question would be, not on that, but are we going to have time for health care and education?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Last time there was complaints because the entire thing was taken up with education, so we were told not to start with some of those because it might take the entire time. So we're trying to hit some other topics.
All right, you're right.
And the next one I want to talk about is, and we're going to start with Representative State, privatization of Medicaid. I read the bill got to do the final. What's going to happen next?
The bill you're referring to is on the Senate side.
Yes, it is.
The Senate side, which would be to actually halt the transition. I wrote a similar bill a couple of weeks ago in the House, and of course that hasn't been considered in the House. Probably neither bill will be considered in the House. I do believe that the transition has gone badly, even recklessly, and I would hope that the CMS would slow it down again. Give us a deep breath and see if we can't meet some of the 16 criteria. I believe I've heard that we haven't met 15 of the 16 criteria that CMS has indicated that we need to do. We spoke, actually the Democratic caucus had the Director Palmer and head of IME, Nikki Stein, and we got all kinds of rosy information, and we even had percentages that exceeded 100%. So when we got to digging down into that information, we found out, I figured out that the 112% or 120% and so on, those figures didn't mean a thing to me at all, because we couldn't really come up with they couldn't come up for us with the numbers that those were based upon, specific target numbers and so on. Because they were including doctors that may have several clinics, or several clinics that might have the same doctor, and so numbers were counted more than once, and then they were counted in that percentage other entities outside the state, and so on. So it was very, very confusing. So when we left that, I was confused, heard nothing but rosy information about how things are going. But immediately when I look at my emails, I look at the Facebook post, I get the phone calls and so on, that there's nothing but chaos. So don't know where that is at this point, but I hope that we can get it resolved soon. Thanks.
Thank you. And I know everybody probably wants to speak on this one, so Representative Running Marquardt, would you like to start?
Thank you. This one is an incredibly important topic because it's dealing with over 560,000 Iowans, some of our most vulnerable Iowans across the state of Iowa. The governor has made a mess with moving Medicaid to private companies, and the instability that this is causing in people's lives, in their caretakers, in the providers' lives, and in the lives of the families who are also working with folks to somehow be able to move forward in this system is incredible. And the couple areas that I am most concerned of, and I asked when Mickey Steer and Director Palmer spoke with us, we're trying to figure out and I'd gone to several of the MCO meetings and the DHS meetings that have been, some of them around here and some of them around other parts of eastern Iowa. And we're trying to figure out where they're going to get all this cost savings from. We're trying to nail it down. And they say wellness and they say ER visits. Well, when 60 to 70% of the people who cost the most in Medicaid are people with disabilities and our senior citizens, then wellness programs and reduced ER visits are not going to cut it, because you can't wellness somebody out of certain conditions or issues. So I asked them blankly if they could give some more specifics on where are you going to get all your cost savings from? So what exact programs? Because all I can see is reduced services for our most vulnerable Iowans in those cases, and I have not heard them. And they're going to get back to me, of course, and I can't wait till that happens next week. But we're going to look and see where they are projecting the profits for the private companies, where they're going to come from, and then where they think they're going to get the savings on top of that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. So we're all waiting to see what CMS decides here in the next week. And we hear wildly different things. So I have heard people say we've only met one of the 16 criteria, and then Director Palmer said we've actually met 14, and the other 2 are in process. So I don't know the actual status, but CMS is going to rule here in the next week, and we need to know because this is supposed to go online the 1st of March. I will say the transition has not been perfect. There have been some issues here, and I will freely admit that. I think what we really have to focus on is making sure that those 560,000 Medicaid recipients have the access that they need to services, they have the quality, and that ultimately we do that at the lowest possible cost. About 65% of Medicaid recipients across the country are in managed care, so we're not paving new ground here. I am concerned, well, we had an actuary come before the Human Resources Budget Committee and gave us statistics across the country, and managed care across the country has improved access, quality, and controlled costs. And I'm concerned about the Senate bill, because if managed care were to go away, Legislative Services Agency said that would cost us another $111 million in FY17. We only have $153 million in new revenue, which means the whole discussion about education is going to be vastly, vastly changed. So I've got some concerns. I want us to come together, though, to try to make this work.
Yes. I want to kind of talk about some of the things that Senator Reiser said about the cost. This number is coming from the same group that kind of went like this about the $50 million in cost savings last year. And that was corrected, and there's no paperwork to show for it, and there's no proof. So also moving forward, according to the FMAP, which is a formula that determines how much the federal government is going to pay their share of our Medicaid costs at Iowa, the FMAP will be increasing next year, which will result in millions more that the federal government will help us partner with for the $4.2 billion that we receive from Medicaid. Medicaid affects everybody in this room. It affects everybody, whether you're a recipient of Medicaid, whether you take care of someone who is on Medicaid, or whether you pay for Medicaid as a taxpayer. You should all be involved and all be aware of what's going on with this. The Senate did pass a bill that severed the contracts because we have time. March 1st is not a done deal. A lot of people say that this is going to take place on March 1st. No, CMS wrote us a letter that says they will reevaluate the 16 metrics surrounding readiness, and then they will decide on March 1st whether it moves forward or not. They're still in an evaluation period. CMS contacts DHS. My goodness, that was a quick amount of time. CMS contacts DHS every week, if not 2 or 3 times a week that they talk with them. And they told us in a Senate group on the telephone 3 weeks ago, they were seriously concerned about moving forward with this. They did not feel that IME was ready to go. There are still major gaps in the network, in the provider network. There were major gaps in the communications network in regard to switching everyone from WellCare over.
The timers are flashing to them.
All right.
This is a very important question,
It's a
and others
huge
want to add,
question.
and I know a minute and a half is short because it's a complicated issue. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go through once, and then we can go through again, and people can do another round on this because it is quite complex and there's a lot to say. So Senator Horn, would you like to start?
I would like to yield to Senator Mathis, rather.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Senator Horn. All right. So so the Senate bill that calls for severing the contracts, we've already passed in the Senate. We debated that. We had 3 Republicans vote with us, and that goes over to the House. The Speaker of the House, Linda Upmeyer, who is a nurse, has already signaled us or telegraphed us that she doesn't really want to take this bill up. Now, there's another bill. It's an oversight bill, so this is a Plan B. If we should move to managed care, the oversight bill protects not only Medicaid recipients and not only providers, but it also calls for government to take protections and make sure that we're running an effective and an efficient process when we move over to managed care. It is a lengthy bill. It's an 18-page bill. It's very comprehensive, and I hope that the House takes it up. And so if they do amend it, we would be amenable to working with them on amending that bill. It is comprehensive. If it's not picked up in the House, it will certainly, parts of it will certainly go through appropriations, of which Representative Reiser sits on, for the House, he sits on appropriations, and Senator Amanda Reagan co-chairs that with Senator Dave Heaton. So there is some hope for that oversight bill. Again, we're waiting for CMS to, we thought that they would contact us yesterday regarding moving forward or not. They said that they would not wait until March 1st because a lot of the WellCare recipients are still transitioning from the defunct WellCare into the 3 other AmeriHealth, AmeriGroup, or United Healthcare. So it's still, there's still 135,000 people with WellCare that don't know what they're going to do right now, and they haven't really made a decision. Some families have had to switch 4 times. It's a train wreck. It's a train wreck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Taylor, would you like to speak on this?
Yes, thank you. Listening carefully to my colleagues, I definitely appreciate what they've said. I don't want to repeat, but I will add a couple of things, hopefully something new. This is a complex issue, and one of the complexities, of course, is the state-federal blend of funding and policies. I do not believe, unfortunately, that the federal government can stop this. I think that Governor Branstad will ultimately get something. And managed care isn't all bad on the one hand, but they haven't quantified for us exactly, other than reduced benefits is what's going to hit the folks, hit the people. And it does affect everybody here. So I have grave concerns about this process. I do strongly support the Senate bill. I'll urge my colleagues in the House to consider the Senate bill, both of them, Plan A and Plan B. As Senator Mathis knows, Ken, Kirsten, and I are on the House Full Appropriations Committee. At some point, we'll see it in the budget, okay? And then I am a glasses half full kind of guy, so I want to give you one little ray of hope in this complicated thing. I did have coffee with the president of the Blank Children's Hospital the other morning, and he gave me a quick story about the Des Moines, the Children's Hospital in Des Moines. There's a neighborhood housing development right across the street, and those folks had a language barrier, and they didn't necessarily understand that they had other options, and they used or overused the ER. The hospital made some changes and basically created a clinic specifically for this population, and it was very helpful, and it did alleviate some of the impact that they were seeing on the Medicaid population on the ER, and that was a positive. So we've got work to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a quick comment. When they talk about the costs, I know that is an issue, whether the state has funding for this, but if you recall, our Medicaid expenses, our administrative costs have been running about 3%. So 3% of $4.2 billion is about 126 million. Well, in these contracts, in this particular program in the transition, they have expectations of 10% to 15% administrative costs. So we're talking about a low end of $420 million. So where does the savings come from when right up front the administrative costs are going to be so much higher? I don't see it, so I think that the whole transition may have been ill-conceived to start with, and I hope we can put a stop to it and go back to a reasonable Medicaid system again. Thank you.
One issue that comes up over and over again when we're looking at adequately funding sort of our priorities is we have over $400 million that comes off our budget right off the top for tax credits. Quite a few of those for very large corporations. My dream scenario for budgeting for the state of Iowa would be that instead of some of our priorities saying we're going to use revision money, so that means sort of like the money at the end when if everything else goes out, the money that's left, that's what we're going to fund our priorities with. Instead, what if we funded our priorities first by adequately funding education, public education in the state of Iowa, and paying...
I neglected to say this, but if we could refrain from clapping, booing, or other...
But I appreciate it, thank you. If we could adequately fund public education first and then our Medicaid, the priorities and the investments that we have promised folks there, and then after that, what's left, we look at where we're going to give big corporations money. I know some of you have seen, it's so difficult for me to see, we're paying a company, a private corporation, tens of millions of dollars to move their corporate headquarters away. And then to not only move away, but they may only lay off only so many Iowans then. And we're going to pay them $16 million for that. And it's just a conversation we need to have more of in the state of Iowa. So when we go to the Capitol, when you're talking to your legislators, and they say there's only so much money in the pie, well, the pie is what's left. So it's like they come and they eat first, and they gobble it all up, and then what's left, the pie that's left, is this little, little sliver, and that's what gets divided for our state's priorities. So we really need to look at budgeting a bit differently. You're welcome.
We're going to start on the next one here, and we're going to talk about education.
Got me all riled up.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just on those tax credits, I mean, realize those tax credits have passed through split government. So, I mean, I'm willing to look at anything, but they've passed with split government, so we need to figure out and assess them and see if they need to be changed. I'm interested in the specifics on that. I just want to correct something. I said that it would cost $111 million more if we didn't do managed care. That wasn't a number picked out of the sky. That $111 million number came from the Nonpartisan Legislative Services Agency, which put that cost on the fiscal note for the bill. So that's different than the governor when they estimated that the cost in the first year would be about $51 million in savings. And by the way, $51 million in the first year, so that's the first 6 months. If we had started January 1st, the delay to March 1st cost $17 million, and the Senate just passed a supplemental to cover the additional cost, and guess what? Those two added together equal about $51 million. So the estimates have been actually pretty good. I'm concerned that if we pull the plug on managed care, there is no suitable backup that isn't going to have an enormous impact upon our budget. And I'm concerned about K-12 funding as well. We've got 93% of our available new revenue going to K-12. If we take $111 million off the top, we've got a real problem.
Thank you. Now we're going to talk about education, and again, this was a hot topic last time, and I know that much of the session was on education questions, and there's a number of them here. But the summary of the questions are, what's going to happen now? The House is one place, Senate's another place, on K through 12, and is there a compromise that's coming? What do people think is going to happen? What do you think should happen? And we're going to start with Representative Ronnie Marquardt.
We are on education?
Yes.
Yay. Great.
What I just said.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just very excited and appreciate it. We got to do the right thing for our kids. We've had children who see the impact in their daily lives, and at the schools they go to, look at what happens when we're not adequately funding our schools, what that means. That puts really very important programs, the music, the arts, those sorts of things, they end up being on the chopping block first. And we also end up with larger class sizes. We know kids do not do better in larger class sizes. We also have had superintendents who tell us, and parents, we had PTA from different school districts come up this last week, in fact, talk to us about the effects of not adequately funding our public education. We need to make public education a priority again in the state legislature. We need to make public education a priority again in the state legislature. That means moving it to the top of the priority list before a lot of these other folks get their money. I I think you had said the Senate was at 4, the House came in at 2, the governor was at 2.45 was his last. And right now it's somebody else can go through the logistics of this, but we're in negotiations right now. The conference committee has been picked, and they are going back and forth, communicating right now on the best way to move forward. But we have urged all of those, or I have urged many of those in the conference committee and other legislators, that this investment is probably one of the most critical investments that we have moving forward for the state of Iowa and its future.
Okay. We're going to go around twice on this one because I know there's a lot to say.
I don't have to go twice again because I
Okay,
went
but
over
if-
just
if
a little
you
bit.
want to skip,
But
that's fine, but
Okay.
but we will if you want to talk twice. We'll
Thank
do that.
you.
Go ahead, Representative Burge.
Yeah, I would just say public education is our top priority. 42% of our approximately $7.3 billion budget goes to K-12. And if you add in the regions, community colleges, that goes up to 55%. So the vast majority of our budget actually goes towards that. We've got $153 million in new available money this year coming up. So that's how much we have that we could increase. And what the House has proposed is using 93% of that for K-12. That includes a 2% increase for supplemental state aid and the $53 million for the teacher leadership program. And then there's some, the state picks up some of the property tax increase as well, which is a small part of that. So the Senate passed 4%. It's now in conference committee. I'm hopeful that we can get this resolved soon because we absolutely have got to give our school districts resolution of this before they have to validate their budgets in April. Thank you.
We met with the superintendents yesterday at the ADA, and it's always a good conversation. It's constructive. They're looking at it certainly from budgetary viewpoint. They don't want to lay off people. They want to make the schools robust. They want to make sure our kids are educated. And Brad Buck, who is the superintendent of schools for Cedar Rapids, said he always frames it up in a way that stops the conversation when we think about things. Yesterday he said, our classrooms today are much different than they were 15 years ago, 10 years ago. We have more kids on free and reduced lunch. We have more ELL kids. You know, even John Spear at College Community was talking about ELL and the number of kids that it's growing in their College Community School District. And so we are still looking at K through 12 the way that we did 15 years ago. We need to, as Representative Ronnie Marquardt said, we need to step up, make education a priority. Yeah, other things are going to get cut, but we're going to have to do that because it's an investment in our future.
Senator Horn.
Thank you. A problem I have is this. We've already voted, I have, for 4% in the Senate. It's gone to House. They have 2%. Now it's in conference committee. And why should I vote for anything that's under 4%? Because 4% really isn't adequate. It makes cuts everywhere anyway. But to put it down to 2% is kind of ridiculous in a sense. I feel that last year we probably should have had the train wreck. We waited for 2 months trying to get what we got, and we got nothing. And now they're saying, why do it again? Why do it again? Well, I think you need a train wreck sometimes to get what you need, and especially when education's been so important, and the quality, and people have moved to the state just to go have their students or their sons and daughters to go to school in Iowa. And I think that I'm put under the pressure to say I need to vote for less than is reasonable for K through 12. I don't know why I should be put in that spot. And because right now, the minimum probably should be voted for is 2.45. And that's not being recommended at all now, and it's being stopped. And I think that if you know out there, how should I vote for 2.45 or less? And I don't think I should be put in that spot except to vote no on it. Thank you.
I have a picture here, I know you can't see it, but this is a picture of the budget targets and last year's spending and this year's numbers. I'm just going to tell you about education in fiscal 17 and compare the House, the Senate, and the governor on education. The proposed number for the governor is $1,203,202 and some change. The Senate is $1,011,600,000. This is hard to read. 668, and the House is $983 million. So we're off by 100 million, 20 million, and 10.6 million across the board. There are a number of dollars in different programs, but we got to make sure, as Representative Running Marquardt said, we put our priorities first, build the rest of the budget around that. We don't want to assume that everything that's out there, it can't be changed, because we've got to do our priorities first. I'm just kind of echoing that, but these are the numbers that we'll have to be looking at. We will see some revenue estimating numbers in March, and then in the next few weeks, and those numbers come out, we'll really get to working on the budget in earnest, now that we've got a lot of the policy stuff out of, well, the first funnel anyway. And then, as was stated over here by my colleagues in the Senate, that we may not be done for a while. We went through this last year, and the governor, we thought we had to deal with him. The House Republicans thought they had to deal with him. Then he vetoed it. So that can't happen again.
Thank you. Representative Steve.
Thank you. Yes, we met yesterday with superintendents in Linn County, and for the last 5 or 6 years, they've been in they refer to as a squeeze period, where they have not been able to hire or fill positions that have from attrition, and the class sizes have grown, and the purchases of textbooks and other things have been put off, and there's been no new technology that they can purchase, and so on and so on. Yesterday we heard from college community that over the past 3 years they've grown by 400 students, and they have not hired an additional staff member to work with those students. We know in Cedar Rapids we're down in the last 5 years about 139 staff, and I believe 68 or 78 of those are teachers. So they're continuing now in just what I would refer to as starve mood. Cedar Rapids says just to stay even with where they are and not have further cuts and larger class sizes, they need 3.72%. We have heard from superintendents across the state. I believe nearly 90% of them said that 4% is the minimum that they need in order to keep the status quo and to try to move ahead with student achievement and to address the needs of their school districts. So we're at 4%. The House is at 2%. And House Republicans, after saying there was no funds, the very next week they found more than $100 million, somewhere between $90 million and $107 million for a tax coupling, which would be depreciation for equipment purchases. And we don't have the money for that, but they passed that in the House anyway. So I don't understand where that $100 million is going to come from, why it wasn't there the week before, and suddenly it's there that they can give it back. So it's just puzzling to me, and we need to fund education. It's our Iowa legacy. It's the most important thing in the state. Our children deserve and need a quality education, and there is a cost. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have to say we're about out of time, and then I want to also thank everybody for coming, and we're going to have one last question, and that's going to deal with minimum wage. And the question is, are you in favor of raising the minimum wage, and what's going to happen with that? And I believe that we're going to start with Representative Rice.
I'm open to raising the minimum wage if we can do so without costing Iowans jobs. I used to work for Goodwill of the Heartland, and we employed lots of people with disabilities, and some of them were making minimum wage, and I'm concerned that if we do across-the-board increases, especially to some of the levels that have been proposed, that some of those who are just hanging on to that bottom rung of the employment ladder are going to be kicked off. And we've seen that once you're kicked off that ladder and you fall into the dependency of some of our government programs, it's really hard to make that transition back into employment. So I'm open to it. I just want to make sure it's at a level that doesn't cost Iowans jobs.
I'm in favor of raising the minimum wage. this is a working legislature, and my other job is with the Child Welfare Agency, and we work with parents who are trying to upskill, and they're trying to move from a minimum wage job to make a good living, to support their families, and to try to still go to school and all of that. On the minimum wage that we have now, it's completely impossible. And so I'm supportive of increasing the minimum wage.
Senator Horn?
The minimum wage, it sounds like if you're going to raise it, it's a lot of money, but it's not. And if you know how much people would have to, at $10 an hour, live on, and will pay for their health care that they have to do, pay for all of their expenses, insurances they have to have, the vehicle they have to drive, the food they have to eat. Even if we raise it, it's hardly enough to be there. So I support raising it. I would like to think that the people out there that need it should get it. They should receive what I would call a living wage. Now, a living wage means that they're working and doing a job and they make enough money they can live on. To raise the minimum wage, it's still not there to make it. Thank you.
I strongly support raising the minimum wage. I've authored bills in the past, and kind of a good news, bad news. Good news, I was able to invoke Rule 60 last year, which is to pull a bill out of committee because they wouldn't remove it out of committee. That's the good news. Bad news is that vote failed. So that bill did not come out of committee. Wow. It's still there. You know, and even since then, we've seen Johnson County raise their minimum wage. Linn County is considering it. There's other counties that are considering it. And that's why I think actually Terry Branstad may be considering and open to so it doesn't have a hodgepodge of different wages around the state and different counties. That may be a positive impetus to say, let's do something about it this year. I hope so. We can still do it. We talk about funnel weight, but there's also leadership bills that are funnel proof. So this bill could be brought out of committee, it could be reintroduced, it could be rewritten. There's still time. We should do it. And if not, we should bring it up as an election issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I definitely support raising the minimum wage. I believe that someone who works 40 hours a week or more than 40 hours a week deserve to have a salary that's a living wage. Thank you.
I have sponsored, authored, supported, tried to vote several times to raise the minimum wage. We look at other states nearby us. Some of them seem to be more conservative states as well that have raised their minimum wage. We look at counties that are now talking about doing so as well. Currently, we have a cliff. Currently, we have a cliff that people, when their wages go up or when other things happen in their life, we have a cliff right now. There has been numbers, and I don't have them with me right now, I was trying to look them up real quick, that says that when you raise the minimum wage, it actually spurs economic development, and there are new jobs created in the community that does so. So it's a difficult thing, but it's a right thing to do moving forward. And I look forward, I appreciate when people say they're open to thinking about it and listening to it and having that, because it's critical for those families who are working 2 or 3 jobs, a way for them to do better by their family. And that's sort of the American dream. We want to make sure that that is, if you work 40 hours or even more every week and you have your family, you should be able, you shouldn't have to go on government assistance for many things. And they want to be self-reliant, and raising the minimum wage, even at a gradual level, which I believe is the best way to do it, would provide that, the American dream here in Iowa for many Iowa families who are left out currently. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Thank the legislators for their participation. Maybe they can stay around for a minute if you have another question. There are questions that we didn't get to. And I just want to remind you that, and the league wants to remind you that your vote is your voice in government. Make sure your voice is heard. Thank you.